He was days away from signing over half his empire to the woman he loved, until a waitress carrying a tray of champagne overheard a single phone call that would have destroyed him. She wasn't supposed to hear it. She wasn't supposed to get involved, and she certainly wasn't supposed to walk up to a millionaire and warn him that his fiancée was planning his downfall. But one whispered sentence in a dimly lit hallway changed everything. "Hello, family. Welcome to Tales by King. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more beautiful stories. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story." The restaurant glowed like a jewel box against the darkening evening sky. Soft amber lights shimmered behind tall glass windows. Inside, the air carried the delicate scent of truffle oil, roasted garlic, and aged wine. A pianist in the corner coaxed gentle melodies from the ivory keys, the music blending seamlessly with the low murmur of wealthy patrons discussing investments, travel plans, and quiet celebrations. Rachel Carter moved gracefully between tables, her black apron pressed neatly against her white blouse. Her dark hair was pulled into a simple bun at the nape of her neck. She had perfected the art of reading a room, who wanted conversation, who preferred silence, who expected perfection. Working at Bellamore wasn't just about serving food. It was about precision, timing, anticipation. And tonight, something felt different. When the hostess led them in, nearly every staff member subtly noticed. The man walked with calm authority, not arrogance. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp features softened by thoughtful eyes. His suit, charcoal, impeccably tailored, suggested quiet wealth rather than flashy display. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, but he didn't need to. His name was Alex Lancaster. Rachel didn't know it yet, but she recognized the type. Self-made, disciplined, observant, the kind of man who built things from nothing. The woman at his side was equally striking, but in an entirely different way. Vanessa Caldwell wore a deep emerald dress that clung perfectly to her figure. Diamonds sparkled at her ears and wrist. Her makeup was flawless, her hair falling in controlled waves over her shoulders. Every movement she made seemed rehearsed. She smiled often, but the smile felt measured. "Table 12, the hostess whispered. Rachel picked up 2 leather-bound menus and approached with a professional smile. "Good evening. Welcome to Bellamore. My name is Rachel, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Alex offered a polite nod. "Thank you." Vanessa barely glanced up from her phone. Rachel poured their water and stepped away, but not before noticing the subtle dynamic between them. Alex leaned forward slightly as he spoke, attentive, engaged. Vanessa responded, but her gaze drifted. Her fingers tapped against the edge of her wine glass in a restless rhythm. When Rachel returned to take their order, Alex thanked her for her recommendations. Vanessa asked pointed questions about the price of the imported wine before finally agreeing with a small, controlled smile. As the evening progressed, Rachel couldn't help observing them in small glances. Vanessa checked her phone constantly. Alex didn't seem to notice. Or perhaps he trusted her enough not to question it. Halfway through their main course, Vanessa's phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't silence it. She looked at the screen, and something changed. Her posture stiffened. "I'll just take this," she said smoothly, rising from her chair. Alex nodded. "Of course." She walked toward the hallway leading to the restrooms, heels clicking sharply against polished marble. Rachel was clearing a nearby table when she saw Vanessa step just out of sight near the corner wall. It wasn't unusual for guests to take calls privately. The hallway was dimly lit, lined with abstract art and decorative sconces. Rachel gathered plates, stacking them carefully. She wasn't trying to listen, but the hallway carried sound, and Vanessa wasn't whispering quietly enough. "Yes, I'm with him now," Vanessa's voice floated back, sharper than before. "He has no idea." Rachel froze mid-step. She told herself to keep moving, to mind her own business. But then, "No, the transfer is next week. The lawyers think it's a restructuring move." A pause. A soft, cold laugh. "Once the shares are in my name, it won't matter what he thinks." Rachel's pulse began to pound in her ears. She leaned slightly closer, not obviously, just enough to hear clearly over the distant piano. "He trusts me completely," Vanessa continued. "After the wedding, everything merges automatically. Joint assets. Joint authority. By the time he figures it out, the damage will be irreversible." Irreversible? Rachel's grip tightened around the stack of plates. A man laughed faintly on the other end of the call. She could barely hear it. "Yes," Vanessa replied. "The rival firm is ready. Once his company stock crashes, they'll acquire what's left. He'll be finished." Silence. Then the final sentence that made Rachel's stomach drop. "And when it's done, I'll be long gone." The plates in Rachel's hands trembled slightly. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't anger spoken in the heat of an argument. This was deliberate. Planned. Vanessa exhaled slowly. "Just make sure the offshore account is ready." The call ended. Rachel's heart slammed against her ribs. For a split second, she stood completely still in the dim hallway light. She could pretend she hadn't heard. She could walk away. After all, wealthy people had complicated relationships. Business dealings were messy. Maybe she misunderstood context. But the certainty in Vanessa's voice haunted her. Rachel quickly returned to the dining area just as Vanessa reappeared, face composed, smile perfectly restored. It was as if the venom in her voice had never existed. She resumed her seat gracefully. Alex looked up at her with warmth. "Everything okay?" "Just a minor detail with the florist," Vanessa replied smoothly. "Wedding things." "Wedding." Rachel's chest tightened. She watched as Vanessa reached across the table, resting her manicured hand lightly over Alex's. He smiled back, unaware. The piano music swelled softly in the background. Candles flickered. Champagne glasses clinked at nearby tables. And Rachel stood a few feet away, holding a tray, suddenly carrying the unbearable weight of knowledge she was never meant to have. Her mind raced. Was it truly her place? If she spoke up, she could lose her job. Bellamore valued discretion above all else. Accusing a wealthy patron's fiancé of conspiracy could end her employment immediately. But if she stayed silent, she imagined headlines. Corporate collapse. Scandal. Financial ruin. And she would know she had heard the warning signs and done nothing. Vanessa laughed again at something Alex said, her performance flawless. Rachel studied Alex carefully now. There was nothing calculating in his expression. No suspicion. Only trust. That, more than anything, unsettled her. Trust was powerful. And fragile. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. Rachel served dessert. Refilled wine glasses. Cleared plates with steady hands that masked the storm inside her. Vanessa's phone buzzed once more. She silenced it this time without answering. Alex requested the check. Rachel brought it with professional composure, though her thoughts churned violently beneath the surface. Vanessa stood again. "I'll step out for some air." Another call, no doubt. This time, she walked toward the restaurant's front entrance. Rachel watched her go. The opportunity stood before her like an open door. Alex sat alone at the table now, reviewing something on his phone. He looked calm, certain of his future. Rachel's heart pounded harder. This was the moment. If she walked away, she would never see him again. If she spoke, everything could change. She took a steadying breath. Then she stepped toward table 12. Rachel paused a few feet away. This was dangerous. Bellamore had strict policies about staff interfering in guests' personal affairs. Discretion was sacred. The manager had once fired a waiter for simply commenting on a public argument between a celebrity couple. And here she was, about to accuse a man's fiancé of plotting financial destruction. She swallowed. You can still walk away. But Vanessa's words echoed in her mind. He'll be finished. Rachel stepped forward. Excuse me, sir? Alex looked up immediately. His attention was direct, focused. Not distracted, not impatient. Yes. His voice was calm, measured. Rachel felt her throat tighten. I need to speak with you. Privately. If that's all right. His brow furrowed slightly. Not in annoyance, but curiosity. Is something wrong with the service? No, sir. It's not that. She glanced toward the entrance, ensuring Vanessa wasn't returning yet. It's about something I overheard. There it was. The line had been crossed. Alex straightened in his chair, phone lowering slowly onto the table. What did you overhear? His tone had shifted, not aggressive but alert. Rachel leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice. I wasn't trying to listen. I was clearing the hallway near the restrooms when your fiancé took a call. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. And her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her voice steady. She mentioned a share transfer next week. She said once everything is in her name, it won't matter what you think. Silence. The music from the piano seemed louder now. Alex's expression did not explode into anger the way she feared. Instead, it went still. Very still. She also said, Rachel continued carefully, that after the wedding, your assets would merge automatically, and that by the time you realized what was happening, the damage would be irreversible. His eyes sharpened. She could almost see his mind working. She mentioned a rival firm, Rachel added, and an offshore account. The air between them thickened. Alex leaned back slightly, studying her. You understand what you're implying. It wasn't a question. Yes, she whispered. And you're certain? She nodded. I wouldn't risk my job to say this if I wasn't. That seemed to land. His gaze flicked toward the entrance again. Still no Vanessa. You could be mistaken, he said evenly. I could be, Rachel admitted quickly. And I truly hope I am. But she said you trusted her completely. She laughed about it. Something in his eyes darkened at that. Trust. He exhaled slowly through his nose. Why are you telling me this? He asked. The question caught her off guard. I don't know you, he continued. You don't know me. This could cost you your employment. She hesitated. Because it's right, she wanted to say immediately. But the truth was more complicated. I grew up watching my father lose everything, she said quietly. His business partner betrayed him. We lost our house. I watched what it did to him. Alex didn't interrupt. If I had heard something back then, if someone had warned him, her voice faltered slightly. I just couldn't ignore it. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not suspicion. Understanding. You realize, he said calmly, that if you're wrong, this accusation could damage my relationship. I know. And if you're right, he added softly, it could save my company. Rachel nodded once. Footsteps echoed faintly near the entrance. Vanessa. Alex's composure snapped back into place instantly, like a mask sliding over his thoughts. Thank you, he said quietly, almost formally. She stepped back quickly, returning to professional distance. Vanessa approached, her smile radiant. Did I miss anything? Just the bill, Alex replied smoothly. Rachel placed the receipt folder on the table, her hands steady now despite the storm inside her. Vanessa's eyes flicked briefly toward Rachel. For a split second, barely perceptible, there was calculation there. Did she suspect? Rachel forced herself not to look nervous. Alex signed the check. He stood, placing a hand at the small of Vanessa's back as they prepared to leave. At the door, he paused, turned slightly, and met Rachel's eyes. It wasn't gratitude yet. It wasn't accusation either. It was acknowledgement, a silent message. I heard you. Then they were gone. The moment the door closed behind them, Rachel's knees felt weak. She retreated into the service hallway, gripping the edge of a stainless steel prep table. What have I done? Her mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Vanessa could complain to management. Alex could dismiss her words and tell his fiancée. She could be fired by morning. Rachel, her co-worker Jason called. You okay? Fine, she answered quickly. Just tired. But she wasn't tired. She was terrified. And yet, beneath the fear, there was something else. Relief. Because whatever happened next, she had chosen courage over silence. Meanwhile, outside the restaurant, Alex helped Vanessa into the car waiting at the curb. As the vehicle pulled into traffic, Vanessa began chatting about floral arrangements and honeymoon destinations. Alex listened, but not in the same way as before. Every word she spoke now passed through a filter, a new lens. He replayed Rachel's warning in his mind. Share transfer. Join assets. Offshore account. Rival firm. He thought back over the past few weeks. Vanessa's sudden insistence on accelerating the wedding date. Her eagerness to review his company restructuring documents. Her subtle pressure regarding merging accounts. Details he had brushed aside. Details that now aligned too neatly. Vanessa reached for his hand. You're quiet, she observed lightly. Just thinking about work, he replied. She smiled. You work too much. He studied her face carefully now. Searching. For cracks. For guilt. For anything. But she was flawless. If Rachel was wrong, he risked ruining a relationship built on years of trust. If Rachel was right, he almost admired the audacity of it. Alex stared out the window as city lights streaked past. He would not confront Vanessa. Not yet. He would verify. He would test. And if there was truth hidden beneath the surface, he would find it. Back at the restaurant, Rachel finished her shift in a haze of anxiety. As she untied her apron at the end of the night, she glanced toward table 12 one last time. The candle had burned low, wax pooling around its base. A simple table. An ordinary evening. But nothing about it had been ordinary. She had set something in motion. Whether it would destroy her or save him remained to be seen. Alex Lancaster did not sleep that night. He lay awake in the penthouse suite he shared with Vanessa, staring at the ceiling while the city glowed beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows. Beside him, Vanessa slept peacefully, her breathing slow and even. Or at least she appeared to. Alex turned slightly, studying her silhouette in the dim light. For 3 years, he had trusted her without hesitation. He had trusted her with access to private events, with confidential company gatherings, with future plans, with vulnerability. And now, a stranger's quiet warning echoed louder than all of that history. He did not believe blindly, but he did not dismiss blindly either. By sunrise, his mind was made up. He would not accuse. He would confirm. The following morning, Alex arrived at Lancaster Technologies earlier than usual. His executive assistant noticed immediately. "You're in early," she remarked. "Schedule a private meeting with legal," he replied. "No calendar entry. Just call them." Within the hour, Alex sat across from his longtime corporate attorney, Daniel Reeves, a man who had helped structure the company from its earliest days. "I need a complete review of every document that has Vanessa's signature attached," Alex said evenly. Daniel blinked. "Is there a concern? Call it due diligence." Daniel studied him carefully. "You're getting married in 3 months." "Exactly." No more explanation was needed. By mid-afternoon, Daniel returned with preliminary findings. "There's been an unusual request filed through your financial restructuring team," Daniel said, sliding a folder across the desk. "A proposal to temporarily transfer 15% of your controlling shares into a trust." Alex opened the file. The beneficiary line made his jaw tighten. Vanessa Caldwell. "It's structured to appear like a tax efficiency move," Daniel continued. "But the timing is aggressive. It accelerates voting power." "Who initiated it?" Alex asked. Daniel hesitated. The request came from Vanessa's legal liaison. Alex's pulse slowed, not with panic, but with clarity. "Pause all action on this transfer," he said calmly. "Tell the board we're revisiting structure post-merger." "Merger?" Daniel frowned. "Wedding merger," Alex replied flatly. Daniel nodded slowly. The first thread had been pulled. Alex wasn't finished. He contacted his cybersecurity director that evening. "I need a discreet review of all external communications tied to my shared financial accounts," he instructed. "Focus on encrypted messaging platforms." "That's sensitive territory," the director warned. "Is there a breach?" "Not yet," Alex said quietly. Within 48 hours, encrypted activity surfaced. Multiple late-night communications between Vanessa and an IP address traced to an executive at Blackridge Capital, a rival firm that had aggressively attempted to acquire Lancaster Technologies the year before. The timestamp of one message aligned precisely with the night at the restaurant. Alex requested the message logs. Though encrypted, fragments were recoverable. Transfer window confirmed. Once join authority activates. Stock destabilization phase begins. The air in Alex's office felt suddenly colder. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't jealousy. This was coordination. At home, Vanessa behaved exactly as she always had. She kissed him good morning. She discussed wedding invitations. She asked about the share restructuring casually over dinner. "So, did your lawyers finalize the adjustment?" she asked lightly, sipping wine. Alex kept his expression neutral. There were some compliance questions. "It's delayed." For a fraction of a second. A flicker. Her smile tightened. "How long?" "A few weeks." "That's inconvenient," she replied smoothly. "We don't want financial confusion before the ceremony." Her tone was gentle, but there was pressure beneath it. Alex studied her now the way he studied competitors before acquisitions. Measured. Analytical. He began noticing details he had previously overlooked. Her insistence on merging not just assets, but executive authority. Her suggestion that certain board members be replaced after the wedding. Her encouragement to simplify his oversight role and delegate signing privileges. Every request, isolated, seemed reasonable. Together, they formed a blueprint. The final confirmation came 3 days later. Daniel entered Alex's office without his usual composure. "You need to see this." He handed over a report compiled by a forensic accountant. Vanessa had established a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands 6 months prior. The registered director of the corporation, an alias tied to Blackridge Capital's investment arm. The planned deposit amount listed in the projected transfer schedule matched the value of Alex's 15% controlling shares. Alex stared at the document for a long moment. There it was. Not suspicion. Not hearsay. Evidence. Concrete. Legal. Devastating. He felt anger rise, but it wasn't explosive. It was cold. Controlled. Strategic. The kind of anger that builds countermeasures. Alex chose his moment carefully. He invited Vanessa to his private office one evening under the pretense of reviewing wedding contracts. She entered confidently, heels clicking across the marble floor. "What's all this?" she asked, glancing at the stack of folders on his desk. "Just paperwork," he replied. He closed the office door behind her. Locked it. Not dramatically. Deliberately. He placed the Cayman Corporation documents in front of her first. Her smile didn't falter immediately, but her eyes changed. "What is this?" she asked lightly. "You tell me." She flipped through the pages, maintaining composure. "It's an investment vehicle. I've been diversifying." "Through a Blackridge proxy director?" Alex asked calmly. A beat of silence. She set the papers down slowly. "I don't know what you think you've found." He slid the encrypted message transcripts across the desk. Then the share transfer request. Then the voting power restructuring timeline. Each piece placed down with quiet precision. The room felt smaller. Her breath became shallower. "This is ridiculous," she snapped suddenly. "You're spying on me?" "You were planning to destabilize my company," Alex said evenly. "That's absurd. Once joint authority activated, Blackridge would short my stock," he continued, his voice controlled. "The market would panic. My board would fracture. And your offshore corporation would absorb the controlling shares at liquidation value." Her silence confirmed everything. He held her gaze steadily. "How long?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer. "How long have you been planning this?" Her composure cracked. "You would have been fine," she said sharply. "You're a billionaire in waiting. You would recover. You were going to destroy my life's work. You care more about that company than you do about me." The words echoed harshly against the glass walls. Alex's expression didn't change. "You never loved me," he said quietly. That struck something deeper than the evidence. For a moment, her face hardened into something unrecognizable. "You were convenient," she replied coldly. "Powerful. Stable. But not untouchable." The final illusion shattered. Alex stepped back from the desk. "The wedding is canceled." Her eyes widened, not in heartbreak, but calculation. "You'll regret this." "No," he said softly. You will. He pressed a button on his desk. Security entered discreetly. Vanessa gathered her purse slowly, her movements tight with fury. This isn't over, she whispered as she passed him. But Alex knew it was. Within days, legal proceedings began. Blackridge Capital quietly distanced itself from the Shell Corporation. The market never learned how close Lancaster Technologies had come to destabilization. Vanessa left the city. Publicly, the wedding was mutually postponed. Privately, trust had been dissected and discarded. Late one evening, Alex stood alone in his office, staring at the skyline. He replayed the timeline. The restaurant. The hallway. The quiet voice of a waitress risking her job to tell the truth. If she hadn't spoken, he calculated the losses mentally. Financial damage. Board collapse. Regulatory investigations. Reputation destruction. All triggered by trust. Instead, he stood untouched. Because someone with nothing to gain had chosen integrity. He didn't know much about her. Only her name. Rachel. And the memory of steady eyes filled with reluctant courage. Alex closed his office lights and picked up his coat. Exactly 1 week after that night at Bellamore, he knew where he was going. Not as a billionaire. Not as a victim. But as a man who understood the value of honesty. And intended to thank it. A week passed. For Rachel, it was the longest week of her life. Every shift felt like walking across fragile glass. She half expected her manager to call her into the office at any moment. She imagined Vanessa returning in outrage. She imagined lawyers, accusations, termination papers. But none of that happened. Instead, there was silence. And somehow, that silence was worse. By Friday evening, Bellamore was fully booked again. Crystal glasses shimmered beneath chandelier light. The pianist had switched to something softer, more romantic. Valentine reservations were approaching, and the staff moved with heightened precision. Rachel adjusted her apron and checked her section list. Then she saw it. Table 12. Reserved. Her stomach tightened. She didn't know why. But something in her chest told her he would come back. At exactly 7 p.m., the front doors opened. Rachel wasn't near the entrance, but she felt it. The subtle shift in atmosphere. The way the hostess straightened slightly. The faint ripple of recognition among two businessmen seated near the bar. She turned. Alex Lancaster stepped inside. Alone. He wore a navy suit this time, no tie. Less formal. More relaxed. But there was something different about him beyond attire. Lighter. Not carefree, but unburdened. The hostess greeted him warmly. He spoke quietly to her, then glanced across the dining room. His eyes found Rachel almost instantly. Her breath caught. He nodded once, polite but intentional. The hostess approached Rachel moments later. He requested you. Her pulse quickened. Specifically, the hostess added. Rachel smoothed her apron and walked toward table 12. Each step felt steadier than the last. When she reached him, she offered a professional smile. Good evening, Mr. Lancaster. His expression softened at the sound of his name. Alex, he corrected gently. If that's all right. She hesitated, then nodded. Good evening, Alex. He gestured to the chair across from him. I won't keep you from work long. I promise. She remained standing. Can I start you with something to drink? Just water for now. She poured it carefully, conscious of her hands. They weren't trembling this time. That surprised her. When she finished, silence lingered briefly between them. He studied her, not intensely, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but thoughtfully. You were right, he said finally. The words landed heavily, even though she had anticipated them. Rachel kept her voice calm. I'm sorry that I was. He gave a quiet, almost humorless smile. Don't be. A pause. She had established offshore accounts, coordinated with a rival firm, structured a share transfer to gain voting control after the wedding. Each sentence was measured, controlled. But beneath the control was something deeper, disappointment that hadn't fully healed. Rachel exhaled slowly. That's worse than I imagined. It would have destroyed my company. There it was. The truth laid plainly on the table between them. "And you stopped it," she said gently. He held her gaze. "Because you spoke." The restaurant noise continued around them, but at table 12, everything felt suspended. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a sealed envelope. He placed it carefully on the table. "I owe you more than a thank you," he said. Rachel stared at the envelope without touching it. "I don't know what's in there," she replied softly. "But I can't accept it. You haven't even opened it." "I don't need to." A faint crease formed between his brows. "Rachel," he said, her name deliberate, "you prevented financial collapse. There were thousands of employees at risk. Families. Investors. Years of work. I understand," she said. "But I didn't do it for compensation." "Then what did you do it for?" The question wasn't skeptical this time. It was genuinely curious. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Because I've seen what betrayal does," she said quietly. "I've seen what happens when someone finds out too late. If I had stayed silent, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself." He studied her face for a long moment. There was no ambition in her eyes. No calculation. Just sincerity. He slowly slid the envelope back toward himself. "I misjudged you," he admitted. "That makes two of us," she said softly. A faint smile touched his lips. "You thought I wouldn't believe you. I wasn't sure." He leaned back slightly in his chair. "Most people in my position would have dismissed you. Most people in my position wouldn't have said anything," she replied. That earned a quiet chuckle. It was the first genuine warmth that passed between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Alex's expression turned more serious. "There's something I've been thinking about all week." She waited. "You risked your job, your security, for someone you didn't know." He paused. "That's rare." Rachel shifted slightly, uncomfortable with praise. "It didn't feel brave at the time," she admitted. "It felt terrifying. Bravery usually does." Their eyes met again. This time, something deeper passed between them. Not attraction. Not yet. Recognition. Two people who understood risk. "Will she?" Rachel began, then stopped. "Pursue legal action?" he finished calmly. "No. She's facing her own consequences." Relief softened her shoulders slightly. He noticed. "You've been worried," he observed. She let out a small breath of laughter. "Every day. That won't be necessary anymore." Something protective in his tone made her heart skip unexpectedly. She quickly redirected herself. "Would you like to order?" "Yes," he said, but his gaze didn't leave hers immediately. "Whatever you recommend." She smiled faintly. "That's a lot of trust. I think I owe you that." She wrote down his order and stepped away briefly, allowing herself a moment to breathe behind the service station. He came back, not with anger, not with accusation, but with gratitude. When she returned with his meal, he surprised her again. "Would you sit for a moment?" he asked. "When you have time." She hesitated. "I'm working." "I know. I won't overstep." She considered it. Then, after ensuring her section was stable, she sat across from him briefly. Not as a waitress. As herself. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "All right. What do you want?" The question caught her off guard. "In life," he clarified. "Not tonight." She blinked. No one had asked her that in a long time. "I want to finish my degree," she admitted. "Business management. I had to pause it to help my mom with medical bills." His expression shifted. Not pity, but respect. "Why business?" "I like understanding how things work," she said. "How decisions shape outcomes." A faint smile appeared on his face. "That makes sense." She tilted her head slightly. "Why did you really come back?" He didn't answer immediately. Then honestly, "To thank you. Properly." A pause. "And because I didn't want your courage to disappear into a single moment." Her heart beat a little faster at that. Outside the windows, city lights shimmered against the night sky. Inside, something new was forming, not dramatic, not rushed, but steady. Respect. And the quiet beginning of connection. When he finished dinner and stood to leave, he didn't offer the envelope again. Instead, he extended his hand. Not as a millionaire. As a man. Thank you, Rachel. She placed her hand in his. His grip was warm. Steady. You're welcome, Alex. He held her hand for just a second longer than necessary. Then he left. Rachel watched him walk out into the night. She didn't know what would come next. But this time, the uncertainty didn't feel frightening. It felt like possibility. After that night, Alex didn't disappear. He returned 3 days later. Not in a chauffeured car. Not with executives or investors. Just himself. He arrived early in the evening, when the restaurant was quieter and the atmosphere more relaxed. He requested table 12 again, but this time there was no weight hanging over it. No deception hidden beneath candlelight. Rachel noticed something else too. When he walked in now, he looked around. Not like a man measuring status. Like someone observing life. Their interactions at first remained simple. Professional. Brief. But gradually, the lines softened. On his third visit, Alex ordered coffee instead of dinner. Just coffee. Rachel asked lightly. I've learned something about this place, he replied. And what's that? The best conversations happen here. She raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a business strategy. He smiled faintly. It's an observation. When she brought the coffee, he gestured toward the chair again. 5 minutes. She hesitated only briefly before sitting. What changed? She asked. You seem different. He leaned back slightly, considering the question seriously. I almost lost everything, he said. Not just financially. Control. Stability. Confidence in my own judgment. But you didn't, she replied gently. No, he said. Because someone interrupted the pattern. He looked at her in a way that made her shift slightly in her seat. Not uncomfortable, but aware. Trust is strange, he continued. In business, I verify everything. In relationships, I stopped verifying. Because you loved her? He nodded once. Rachel studied him carefully. It's not wrong to trust someone. No, he agreed quietly. But it is dangerous to ignore instincts. She thought about that long after he left that night. As weeks passed, Alex's visits became consistent, but never excessive. He never disrupted her work. Never demanded attention. Sometimes he would read while she handled other tables. Sometimes they spoke only for a few minutes at the end of her shift. Their conversations moved beyond what happened with Vanessa. They spoke about business models, about leadership mistakes, about ambition. He learned that Rachel had completed 2 years of business school before withdrawing to help her mother after a medical emergency drained their savings. She learned that Alex had once slept on the floor of his first office because he couldn't afford both rent and payroll. You? She asked skeptically. I owned one suit, he said dryly. And it wasn't this good. She laughed. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh freely. And he found himself wanting to hear it again. One evening, after closing, they sat outside on the small patio behind the restaurant. The city hummed beyond the alley, but the space felt strangely private. I looked into your university, Alex said casually. Rachel stiffened slightly. Why? Curiosity. That kind of curiosity comes with spreadsheets, she replied cautiously. He didn't deny it. You have exceptional grades, he said. You left in good standing. She folded her arms. Alex, I'm not offering charity. That's exactly what it sounds like. He leaned forward slightly, his tone steady. It sounds like an investment. She frowned. In what? In someone who understands risk, ethics, and decision-making under pressure. She held his gaze firmly. You barely know me. I know you risked your job for the right reason. Silence settled between them. The air felt heavier now. I won't be someone's project, she said quietly. His expression shifted immediately, not offended but understanding. That's not what I meant. Then what do you mean? I mean, he said carefully, if financial barriers are the only reason you're not finishing your degree, that problem has a solution. And what's the return on your solution? She asked. He didn't hesitate. Repayment. Structured. Formal. With interest if you insist. That caught her off guard. You'd loan me the tuition? Yes. She searched his face for any trace of hidden motive. There wasn't one. I don't want you to feel indebted, he added. You've already done enough. I don't want to feel owned, she replied softly. You wouldn't be. They sat with that tension for a long moment. Finally, she exhaled slowly. I'd need terms. A small smile tugged at his mouth. Of course you would. They drafted an agreement, not overly formal, but clear. Tuition support as a private loan. Repayment beginning 1 year after graduation. No strings. No expectations. When she signed it, she felt something unfamiliar. Not dependency. Partnership. Classes resumed 2 weeks later. Rachel reduced her shifts slightly, but continued working at Bellamore. She refused to quit. I don't want to forget where I started, she explained. Alex respected that. Their conversations deepened as her coursework progressed. She would bring case studies to him, challenging his decisions. You scaled too quickly in year 3, she said one evening, reviewing his company's early growth timeline. He raised an eyebrow. That expansion built the foundation. It also nearly bankrupted you. He stared at her for a moment, then laughed softly. You would have been dangerous in a boardroom at 20. I still could be, she replied. The air shifted. Not playful. Charged. He noticed it. So did she. It happened unexpectedly. One rainy evening, the restaurant closed early due to a citywide power outage in nearby districts. Staff were sent home quickly. Rachel stepped outside to find the rain heavier than expected. Before she could open her umbrella, headlights pulled up. Alex stepped out, holding another umbrella. You didn't have to come, she said, surprised. I was already nearby. That wasn't entirely true, but he wasn't about to admit he had checked the weather forecast. They stood beneath the umbrella together, closer than usual as rain poured around them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she said quietly, I don't want this to become complicated. It already is, he replied gently. She looked up at him. Rain reflected in the city lights around them. You're rebuilding trust, she continued. I don't want to be part of a rebound. His jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in conviction. You're not. How can you be sure? Because what I feel when I'm with you is calm, he said honestly. Not distraction. Not escape. Her heart beat faster. And what do you feel? He asked softly. She hesitated. Safe, she admitted. The word hung between them. He didn't move closer. Didn't rush. He simply lifted a hand and gently brushed a raindrop from her cheek. If this ever feels like pressure, he said quietly, you tell me. She nodded. The space between them closed naturally. Not rushed. Not desperate. When he kissed her, it wasn't dramatic. It was steady, certain. And for the first time since the night she overheard that call, Rachel felt something stronger than fear. Hope. Their relationship didn't explode into headlines. It grew quietly. They went to bookstores instead of galas. Shared takeout on his balcony instead of attending investor parties. He introduced her to his world gradually, not as an accessory, but as an equal. And she challenged him in ways no one else had. You don't need to control every outcome, she told him once. I built my life by controlling outcomes. And nearly lost it because of blind trust, she countered. He couldn't argue with that. Their connection wasn't built on wealth. It wasn't built on rescue. It was built on choice. Every day, they chose to continue. And somewhere between business case studies, late-night conversations, and rain-soaked sidewalks, friendship became love. Not because he was a millionaire. Not because she saved him. But because they saw each other clearly. And stayed. 1 year later, Rachel stood in front of the mirror in her small apartment, adjusting the sleeve of her blouse before class. Her textbooks were stacked neatly on the kitchen table. A planner filled with deadlines, strategy notes, and highlighted case studies sat beside them. She had just completed her first year back at the university. Top of her cohort. Her professors had begun using her analysis as examples during lectures. She still worked part-time at Bellamore, though fewer shifts now. It was a choice she made intentionally. I want to remember effort, she once told Alex. Not just comfort. He admired that about her more than he could ever fully express. The loan agreement between them remained untouched, structured, clear, professional. She had already started setting aside money to repay him ahead of schedule. "You don't have to rush," he told her once. "I know," she replied. "That's why I want to." There was pride in her voice. Not stubbornness. Strength. Alex had changed too. The betrayal had sharpened him, but loving Rachel softened him in ways he hadn't expected. He delegated more, listened more, questioned his own instincts when they leaned toward control. He found himself seeking her perspective on major company decisions, not because she saved him once, but because her thinking was disciplined and grounded. "You assume loyalty where contracts exist," she pointed out during one discussion about a potential merger. He paused. And loyalty and obligation are not the same thing. He leaned back, studying her carefully. She wasn't impressed by power. She wasn't intimidated by it either. And that balance was rare. Very rare. Exactly 1 year after the night at Bellamore, Alex made a reservation. Table 12. He coordinated quietly with the restaurant manager weeks in advance. Not extravagantly. Not with fireworks or spectacle. Just intention. When Rachel arrived for her shift that evening, she noticed something subtle. The lighting near table 12 seemed warmer. The piano player was rehearsing a softer set. Her manager gave her a knowing smile but said nothing. At 7 p.m., the doors opened. Alex stepped inside. This time, he carried no briefcase. No visible tension. Just a quiet certainty. He was shown to table 12. Rachel approached slowly, her heart already aware that this night was different. "Good evening," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Good evening," he replied. There was something in his eyes, steady, resolved. She noticed a small velvet box resting near his hand. Her breath caught, but she said nothing. He stood as she reached the table. "1 year ago," he began gently, "you walked toward me with information that could have destroyed your security." Her pulse quickened. "You didn't owe me anything," he continued. "You didn't know me, but you chose courage." The restaurant noise seemed to fade again, just like it had that first night, but this time not with fear, with anticipation. "You saved my company," he said. "But more than that, you restored my ability to trust my own judgment." He stepped around the table now, closing the distance between them. "Losing Vanessa hurt," he admitted quietly. "But not because I lost her. Because I questioned myself." Rachel's eyes softened. "You reminded me that integrity still exists," he continued. "Not in contracts. Not in boardrooms. In people." He reached for her hands. They were warm. Steady. "I didn't fall in love with you because you saved me," he said clearly. "I fell in love with you because you challenge me. Because you think independently. Because you refuse to be owned. Because you stand your ground." Her vision blurred slightly with emotion. "You don't need my money," he continued. "You don't need my name. You don't need my power." He lowered to one knee. "But I need you." The restaurant grew quiet. Staff paused subtly, pretending not to watch. "I don't want a merger," he said softly, a hint of warmth touching his voice. "I don't want a contract disguised as love." He opened the velvet box. Inside was a ring, elegant, refined, not ostentatious. A single diamond set in platinum. "No hidden clauses," he said gently. "No power imbalance. No rescue story." His voice steadied even more. "Just partnership." He looked up at her fully. "Rachel Carter, will you build a life with me? As my equal. As my partner. As the woman I trust more than anyone else in this world." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she was smiling. She didn't answer immediately. She stepped closer instead, kneeling down slightly so their eyes were level. "You once asked me what I wanted," she whispered. He nodded faintly. "I want respect. I want growth. I want honesty, even when it's uncomfortable." "You have it," he said without hesitation. "I want to stand beside you," she continued, "not behind you." "You already do." She studied his face for a long moment. The man who had once been nearly destroyed by deception. The man who rebuilt himself without bitterness. The man who offered her support without ownership. "Yes," she breathed. Relief and joy crossed his features at once. "Yes," she repeated, stronger now. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. The restaurant erupted into soft applause, not overwhelming but warm. Rachel laughed through tears as Alex stood and pulled her into an embrace. Not possessive, not triumphant, certain. Their engagement didn't become a spectacle. There were no magazine spreads, no extravagant public announcements. Instead, there were planning sessions that felt collaborative, shared decisions, balanced conversations about prenups and financial independence, discussed openly, respectfully, intelligently. Rachel insisted on revising the loan agreement. "I don't want that shadow lingering," she said. Alex nodded. They restructured it formally, blending transparency with fairness. Not because they doubted each other, but because love, to them, now meant clarity. On the night before their wedding, Alex returned alone to Bellamore one last time. He stood briefly near table 12, remembering the man he had been. Trusting, blind, almost broken, and the waitress who chose not to stay silent. The following evening, Rachel walked down the aisle, not into wealth, not into rescue, but into partnership. And as they exchanged vows, Alex held her hands the same way he had 1 year earlier. Steady, certain. He had built an empire from risk. But the greatest risk he ever took was trusting again. And this time, it wasn't misplaced. Because the strongest foundations aren't built on money or status. They're built on courage, on truth, and on the quiet bravery of a woman who chose to speak, and a man wise enough to listen. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you find this story worth watching. If you do, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more beautiful stories, like, comment, and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Your support and engagement encourage me to post more videos. Thanks for watching.